Disclaimer. This book may contain content that is considered historically inaccurate or culturally insensitive by modern standards. My hope is that by exploring old literature, we will better understand why people of the past thought the way that they did and understand the influences that shape their culture. This video is not intended for young audiences. Content note about A Traveler's Ordeal. This story does contain period-typical racism, and I have modified a few words to make it less hurtful to modern audiences. Hi, I'm Morgan, and today I will be reading to you from Out of Door Book. This is the 7th book in a series or collection of books called The Children's Hour, which were published by Houghton Mifflin Co. in 1907. A Traveler's Ordeal by Louis du Couret. When I entered the apartment where the Najib was seated, surrounded by his court, he rose from the bench on which he sat, and saluted me with 21 salams. Then, approaching, he took me by the hand and led me into the center of the group, where I seated myself upon a hasir, placed for me by a enslaved person of color. When all were ranged around in their places, the Najib opened the proceedings, saying, "We know who you are, Haji, and whence you come, and we have heard of your sojourn at Mecca with the chair of Hussein and the man of Sana, and our couriers have apprised us of all that has happened on the journey from Sana hither. Wishing neither to deceive you nor to lay snares, we thus notify you, and it will be for your interest to be equally candid with us, for we detest deceit. Liars meet with no mercy here, death being the punishment dealt out to them when proved guilty. Answer plainly, then, what motive has brought you hither?" "I have heard, Sidi," replied I, "that your country resembles neither Europe nor Africa, nor yet any other part of Asia that I have traveled through, and that I should here see many things not elsewhere to be found. This, and this alone, is my motive for coming here." "And wherefore do you desire to see these things?" asked the Najib. "Ask of Allah," said I. "Why, some men love noise, others silence. Why, some seek the crowd, others solitude. And then I will tell you why I should like to descend into the depths of ocean and see the monsters that inhabit it, why I long to visit the firmament and the stars that shine over us. Allah has endowed me with admiration of his works, wherefore I would visit even the shifting sands and brave the storms of the desert." After some further questions, the Najib told me that it would be necessary for me to submit to a certain ordeal imposed upon all strangers coming to Marab. Then, to the clapping of his hands, there came 4 enslaved people of color, who, courteously seizing me, stripped off all my garments in the midst of the assembly, and anointed me with butter from head to foot, after which they thumped and basted me all over, a process, however, to which I had long been accustomed, and one beneficial in its effects, softening the skin and rendering the muscles pliant. This done, other enslaved people entered, bringing a flota of red silk and a samada, with which they invested me. Then the Najib again advanced towards me, and, taking me by the hand, led me to the serir, where he seated me alongside of him, saying that, before submitting me to the ordeal, which we should partake together of the diaf, which, on his again clapping his hands, was brought in upon a mat by other enslaved people. This repast was composed of meat, dried dates, honey, and camel's milk, all contained in wooden bowls, a repast simple in its elements, but served up with the greatest neatness. After the diaf, we recited the first chapter of the Koran, and then the ordeal commenced. Leading me to the terraced roof of the tower, they told me that if I had really no mysteries to conceal from them, I should not hesitate to throw myself from the battlements, confident that the Prophet would not fail to save me from harm by his miraculous intervention. It was no time to retreat, for the least show of hesitation on my part might have been fatal. I had heard at Sana and elsewhere that by displaying courage and presence of mind among these Freemasons, as they are called, one is sure to pass safely through their ordeals, no matter how severe. Without a moment's hesitation, therefore, I dashed forward to precipitate myself from the height, but my feet were hardly off the ground when I was seized by 4 vigorous arms. Expecting to be congratulated for my courage, I looked around. All were calm and imperturbable, the Najib merely saying, "You've put a bold face on this matter, certainly, but anybody might have done the same. Besides, we know not whether your courage was not simulated, and your heart shaken with fear. Let us now descend to the vaults beneath the tower. There, in your conflict with savage beasts, we shall see whether you possess the courage of a true man, the heart to dare, and the hand to strike." A shiver ran through me at this announcement, but I looked steadily at the Najib and signified my readiness to proceed. We descended in silence from the terrace and entered the basement of the tower, where two enslaved people attached a key to my girdle, placing in my left hand a copper lamp and in my right a scimitar. "Go through the vaults," said the Najib, "until you reach the dens, which are 5 in number, containing each a panther. The key in your girdle is that of the middle den. Walk straight forward. The doors will open of themselves to admit you. Watch carefully the light of your lamp, and turn not to look behind you whatever happens. For the first duty of a good and brave man is to keep the lamp of his heart ever alight, and never to go back upon his steps." Upon this, the assembled courtiers made way for me, and I found myself upon a marked-out path, which I followed, but had not gone many paces when I heard the door of the vault shut behind me, and found myself alone in this subterranean region, without any means of escape. Keeping my eyes fixed on the ray of pale light thrown before me by the lamp, I traversed, with a sad heart, the long, narrow passages which formed the first part of my journey, until I found myself in a cavern of considerable size. The sides of this cave were of solid rock, upon the dark ground of which grotesque shapes were figured out by the sparkling stalactites and stalagmites, while, upon the damp floor, brambles interwove themselves among the windings of the rock, around the moss-covered stems of which horned vipers were winding their gray coils, while swarms of other reptiles twisted and twined along the ground. From this cavern I at first saw no door of exit, and was in hopes that my task was nearly finished, when suddenly an immense stone detached itself noiselessly from the rocky wall, opening a new passage before me, and closing after me when I had passed through. The passage into which I now entered was built in masonry, of large cut stones. Proceeding on my course, I passed through several other galleries, some of which were so low that I could not get through them without stooping, on either side of which I saw the doors of dungeons deeply embedded in the thick walls. At length I entered a large hall, which appeared to be the center of the frightful network traversed by me, and the sepulchre of the wretched strangers condemned to perish of hunger in these caverns, for the ground was covered with human skeletons and skulls, strewed upon a deposit of bones reduced to dust, indicating many generations of victims. A charnel house odor pervaded this vault, through which the air vibrated with a dull, moaning sound. I experienced an oppressive sense of sadness as I regarded these miserable human relics, a sadness which bears testimony to the sympathy that unites man to man, for it arises from our share in the sufferings of those who have died before us. Hastening to leave this abode of horror, I walked rapidly to the farther end, where, however, I could find no trace of a door, although I tried the wall everywhere with the hilt of my scimitar. I decided, therefore, to retrace my steps through the dismal charnel house and regain the gallery by which I had entered, but on arriving there I found the entrance closed by a door barred with iron, and solid as the rock. Then a frightful idea occurred to me. I suspected that the Najib and his counselors, either from being dissatisfied with my replies to their questions, or from some other reason, had left me to die in this charnel house, where so many wretched mortals had already ended their days. Already I fancied myself mouldering away among these horrible skeletons, and, falling on my knees, I was about commending myself to heaven when a door, which I had not hitherto observed, owing to its being of the same color as the rock, opened before me. This door, which was near the one by which I had entered the dungeon, led me to the foot of a rickety staircase, the steps of which tottered beneath my feet, entering by these into other low, winding galleries, similar to those through which I had already passed. I found on every side the same traces of cruel barbarity, dungeons built into the masonry of the walls, sepulchres so deep down that the most piercing cries of wretched beings buried alive there could never reach the upper air. Suddenly, I thought I heard a smothered sound as of growls, a few paces in advance, when, on hastening in the direction from which it came, I discovered, to my great joy, that I was before the dens of the panthers, for now it was death for death, which was far preferable to being buried alive. Laying down my lamp, I advanced boldly toward the den that had been described to me, holding my scimitar in my right hand, the key in my left. The instant I opened the door, the panther drew back to the farther side of the den, crouching down in readiness for a spring. I felt his pestilent breath blowing upon me as he glared at me with his flaming eyeballs, and sheathing his terrible claws and uttering a long, low growl. At this moment I raised my scimitar, and drawing the door toward me with all my strength, was about rushing into the den to attack the panther before he could spring upon me, when in an immense iron plate shot down through grooves into the rock and fell between me and the animal. A brilliant light now shone all around, displaying to my view the Najib, attended by his suite. "It is written, O Haji," said he, addressing me, "that you are not to die thus." Then, ascending from the dungeons, we returned to the apartments of state, where each took the place previously occupied by him. "Allah be praised," said the Najib, addressing me. "So far you have come bravely through the trials. We are now going to take counsel on the answers you have made to us, and to decide your fate according to the opinion of the majority with regard to your words and actions." Hereupon 4 enslaved people, the same by whom I had been rubbed down, conducted me into the antechamber where the guard kept watch. Man is wonderfully made. I had faced with indifference the leap from the tower, the glaring eyeballs of the panther. But now that immediate death no longer threatened me, it was with but a bad grace that I submitted to be led to the further vexatious tests in store for me. I had been in the antechamber about half an hour, when the clapping of hands was heard, 3 times repeated. The guards opened the door, and I again found myself face to face with my judges. At a signal from the Najib, 2 of the guard entered with a cushion, on which lay a large cutlass in a sheath of gold, the hilt of it glistening with precious stones. I was then commanded to kneel down, a command which I promptly declined to obey, thinking that my last moments were come. I told them that if my life was to be forfeited, they must take it as I stood. For a moment no one stirred, and I was in hopes that I had gone safely through another test, when the Najib again signaled, and the 4 enslaved people, once more seizing upon me, placed me forcibly in a kneeling posture, in which they held me with iron grasps, in spite of my efforts to rise. Then the Najib, taking the cutlass off the cushion, unsheathed it, and handed it to a personage who appeared to be the state executioner, who whirled it several times around my head, the broad blade flashing as it whizzed close by. Seizing me by the hair with his left hand, the headsman then bent my head over one side, and applied the edge of the sword to my neck. It felt cold. Under no circumstances whatever, not even in sport, is the contact of cold iron agreeable to the cuticle. Having thus, as it were, marked the spot where the blow was to fall, the headsman raised his right arm to its full extent, and was about to strike, when voices were heard in the antechamber, and, at a sign from the Najib, he dropped his arm and held the sword with its point downward. A guard entered, announcing that a person wished to communicate with the council. This person, who was no other than Hamza, the man who threatened me with his scimitar because I did not quell the tempest, now entered, crying out to the assembly that he came to demand my death. "Rise, Haji," said the Najib, addressing me, "and say whether this man is known to you." On my replying in the affirmative, he ordered my accuser to divest himself of his weapons and speak. "This Haji," said Hamza, when he had given up his weapons to one of the enslaved people, "is an emissary of the devil, a magician, and a caster of the evil eye. On the march from Sada to Murib, he ascended Kasur el-Shaitan, from which he returned in safety, and as he is the only man who has ever done so, I hereby impeach him of compact with the evil spirit, and of having caused the death of many of our company by delivering them over to serpents." "Already," replied the Najib, "has the Haji been condemned to forfeit his life. It matters not, then, whether your accusation be true or false, for die he must." "Grant me one favor, then," rejoined Hamza. "I have made a vow to kill this man with my own hand. If the thing is possible, let me redeem this vow by executing the sentence you have passed upon him." "Yet those who have vowed is a sacred duty," said the Najib. "By your hand, then, let this man die." Again, the 4 enslaved people made gestures to me to fall on my knees, an order which I now obeyed, seeing that resistance was useless. The sword was passed from the hands of the headsman to those of my second executioner, who grasped it with savage joy, raised it aloft with his 2 hands, and was about to bring it down upon me with all his might, when the Najib stopped him, saying, "You strike on one condition only, that you lose your own head if you fail to take off that of the victim at a single blow." "Suppose I kill him at the first blow with another weapon than this?" said Hamza, his Arab eyes gleaming with a cunning light. "What then?" "You can choose your weapons," replied the Najib. "Give me my pistols, then." "Not so," said the Najib. "The sentence must be executed with an edged weapon." "That condition was not made in granting my demand," retorted the fanatic. "I have already accepted your terms, and it is unjust to impose new ones upon me." "There is truth in the words of this man," said the Najib. "Give him his pistols." Hamza seized the weapons with trembling haste, tried them with the ramrod to see that the charges had not been drawn, and, pointing them close to my body with both hands, fired. I did not fall, nor did I feel any sensation of pain, excepting a sharp twinge at my left side. My foot was on fire there, but it was immediately removed by order of the Najib, and my wound, which proved to be nothing more than a slight excoriation caused by the blaze of the pistol, carefully examined. It was evident that the pistols had not been loaded with ball. "There," exclaimed Hamza, "I told you that this man was a sorcerer, an emissary of hell." "He is neither the one nor the other," said the Najib. "It is the will of Allah that he should live, and as for you, know that your life is now in his hands." "I am ready," said the wretched fanatic, whose fury against me was now changed into terror, as he fell on his knees before me, reciting the Bismillah. But I desired him to rise, saying that I wished him no harm. The spectators now congratulated me upon my courage and coolness, but not a word was said about my clemency, for it is a peculiarity of the Arabs to regard clemency as weakness, and cruelty as energy. They respect no man so much as the tyrant who makes himself feared. The chief men grasped me by the hand, and honored me with the salute of the country, which consists in placing the chin first on the right shoulder of the guest, and then on the left. Surgeons, who had been sent for to dress my wound, now arrived, but I begged the Najib to allow Salim to go to the tents for which some of my own remedies, on the application of which, feeling more at ease, I requested permission to visit the town, attended by my servant. My request was not only granted with politeness, but they insisted upon sending with me one of the chief men as a cicerone, and 2 guards for my protection. And that is the end of A Traveler's Ordeal by Louis du Couret. I hope that you enjoyed the story, and I hope that you're having a great day. Bye!